The Shameless you watched for 11 seasons was a carefully crafted lie, a sanitized version of a much darker reality. Today, we unearth the truth the chroniclers of the Gallagher story tried to bury. Frank Gallagher was never an alcoholic who couldn't function. He was a predator who used alcoholism as a flawless alibi for 11 seasons. Every story needs a villain, but the most dangerous villains never look like one. For 11 seasons, one man stood at the center of the Gallagher family's existence. He was introduced as a disaster, a drunk, a tragedy. The show told you to pity him. It told you to laugh at him. It told you he was chaos in human form. It lied. Here is the chilling reality the show embedded in plain sight. A man whose alcoholism rendered him non-functional cannot simultaneously defraud hospitals, cannot work a room with surgical precision, cannot navigate bureaucratic systems that defeat sober, educated adults. And yet, Frank Gallagher did all of these things, repeatedly, successfully. The coexistence of these two realities is not a contradiction, it is a confession. Think about the implications of what you just heard. A man who activates competence only when there is something to extract is not struggling with addiction, he is using it. Alcoholism, for Frank Gallagher, was never the obstacle. It was the infrastructure. It was the predatory mechanism that made everything else possible. The man on the floor was never asleep. He was listening. Here is a question the show never asked directly. How does a man who cannot function deliver speeches of this precision? How does a man drowning in alcohol always know exactly how much chaos is too much? Because he was not drowning, he was navigating. And the Gallagher house was not his catastrophe, it was his design. Imagine a man who, at some point in his early life, made a calculation, a cold, existential calculation, that the world would not give him what he wanted through effort, through talent, through merit, but that the world would give him everything he needed, if he performed the right kind of helplessness. And so, he built his alibi, brick by brick, child by child. Every predatory mechanism requires infrastructure. Frank Gallagher's infrastructure had 6 components, 6 children, each one engineered, each one calibrated, each one a specific instrument in a system Frank spent decades constructing. Let us examine the evidence. The first and most critical component of Frank's infrastructure was his eldest daughter. Fiona Gallagher began managing the Gallagher household at the age of 9 years old. The show framed this as tragedy. The chilling reality? It was strategy. Every time Fiona climbed, Frank's chaos escalated. Every time Fiona stabilized, a new crisis pulled her back. The timing was not coincidental, it was protocol. Frank did not accidentally derail Fiona's upward mobility. He maintained it, the way a landlord maintains a building, just functional enough to keep it serving him, never functional enough to let it become something else. Fiona Gallagher was not Frank's daughter. She was his load-bearing wall. The second component of Frank's infrastructure was more volatile. Philip Gallagher, Lip, was brilliant, dangerously brilliant. The show told you his alcoholism was his tragic flaw. The suppressed truth? His alcoholism was his inheritance. Imagine a man who recognizes genius in his son and understands, with predatory clarity, that genius is an existential threat to his control. These 3 words, delivered across years, were not a father's confession. We're the same. They were a biological program. Frank did not cause Lip's addiction. He planted it. He watered it. He normalized it as the natural destiny of Southside intelligence. And when the seed finally bloomed, Frank's most dangerous variable had been successfully neutralized. The third component reveals something even more chilling. Ian Gallagher inherited bipolar disorder from Monica. This is documented, biological, real. But here is what the evidence shows. Frank consistently romanticized Monica's instability. He framed mental illness as Gallagher authenticity. He built a cultural architecture inside that house, in which getting well felt like betrayal, and staying unwell felt like belonging. Frank did not cause Ian's illness, but he built the environment in which Ian could not heal from it. This was not neglect, this was maintenance. But Frank's predatory mechanism was not limited to his family. It extended to every institution that should have stopped him. Here is the chilling reality of the institutional conspiracy. Systems built to protect the vulnerable are most perfectly exploitable by those who perform vulnerability without experiencing it. Frank was not a man who occasionally beat the system. He was a man who understood the system's compassion protocols and weaponized them. Every deception has a breaking point. Every mechanism, no matter how precisely engineered, eventually meets the one variable it cannot control: time. In his final hours, Frank Gallagher wrote a letter. The show presented this letter as his emotional farewell, his moment of humanity. Read it again. Lip, psychologically precise. Identified, self-sabotage mechanism. Correctly diagnosed. Debbie, trajectory mapped. Monica comparison deployed. Ian, emotional complexity assessed. Filed. Carl, power dynamic noted. Categorized. Liam, the youngest, the most innocent, observed. This letter was written by a man in cognitive decline, a man whose dementia had allegedly stripped him of coherent thought. And yet, every assessment is accurate. Every psychological profile is correct. Every child is seen with a clarity that 11 seasons of blackouts were supposed to have prevented. The deathbed letter was not Frank's emotional unveiling. It was his revealed files, the dossier of a man who had been watching his subjects for decades. Imagine a predator whose infrastructure has collapsed, whose primary mechanism has been removed, whose system is failing. What does that predator's mind return to when stripped of all performance? It returns to the blueprint. It returns to the first and most critical component. It returns to Fiona, his last coherent words on Earth. "You cried a lot as a baby. You're mad all the time, but so beautiful." The show called this tenderness. The chilling reality? It was the confession of a man who consumed a person so completely that at the moment of death, he could not distinguish her from a stranger. He had studied her so thoroughly, tracked her so completely, occupied her identity so entirely, that his dying mind had no boundary between Fiona Gallagher and any woman who stood near him and offered care. He did not miss her. He recalled her, the way a general recalls a lost position. Here is the most damning piece of evidence in the entire 11-season case file. Fiona left in season 9. Frank's decline accelerated immediately, not gradually, not slowly, immediately. The show told you Frank was dying of alcoholism, of age, of time. The evidence tells a different story. Frank's infrastructure lost its primary component, and without Fiona, the machine that Frank Gallagher had spent a lifetime building had no reason to keep running. The show sent him to heaven, on a bar stool, beer in hand, absolved. Frank Gallagher died on March 21st, alone, unmourned in the moment of his death. His family, celebrating at the alibi, unaware. The show framed this as poetic justice, the predator dying alone while his victims thrived. But here is the existential threat the finale failed to address. Frank Gallagher did not die. He distributed. Lip. Self-destruction dressed as intelligence. Frank's biological legacy. Fully operational. Debbie. Emotional predation dressed as need. Monica's ghost wearing Frank's architecture. Carl. The predatory mechanism. With a badge. Ian. Volatility dressed as passion. The biological inheritance fully expressed. Liam, the youngest, being raised in the house Frank built, by siblings Frank shaped. Frank's name will not appear on any of their diagnoses. His face will not appear in any of their therapy sessions. His fingerprints are not on any of their failures. But his architecture is present in every single one of them. The predator died. The predation continued. Imagine an infrastructure so thoroughly embedded that even its dismantling serves the original design. The house becomes money. The money goes to the children. The children spend it trying to build lives, using the tools Frank gave them. Think about the implications of this. Frank's final act of architectural genius was dying at exactly the right moment. Late enough that his children were too old to be taken by the state. Early enough that the inherited mechanisms were fully operational. And just dramatic enough that the story ended with everyone looking up, instead of in. The show broke the fourth wall in every single episode. You thought they were updating you on the plot. They were not. They were addressing you as a participant, because you were not watching the Gallagher family. You were sustaining them. Every laugh you gave Frank's chaos was a verdict, not guilty. Every time you called him a lovable disaster, you handed him his alibi. The show did not hide Frank Gallagher's predatory mechanism from you. It presented it, and trusted that you would call it comedy. It was right. The most effective predators in human history never needed cages or chains. They needed only to make their captives believe that the walls around them were built from love. Frank Gallagher did not fool his children. He fooled everyone who ever watched them suffer and called it entertainment. He never needed to hide. You were always looking somewhere else. If this truth shocked you, smash like and subscribe for the next dark story from the Pulse. The candles are always burning.